What's going on, dude? What's going on? Welcome in. What's going on, Eugene? What a day. I gotta say that. Today was definitely a flip of the script here today. They literally just switched it up on us. I don't. That was just bonkers what they did. I pretty much woke up this morning. What's going on, Derek? I woke up this morning and I'm like, oh, today we're gonna have a nice gap up after I saw the inflation data. So when I saw that and I saw it starting to gap up, I'm like, okay, today might not be a day in which we're just in a box. We might have a nice actual trend day today. Psych, they pulled the rug on us, and that was pretty much just chop all the way down, made that nice little falling wedge into the end of the day, pretty much across the board in a lot of different names, and that was pretty much all she wrote for the day. So definitely a bloody day. I think a lot of traders pretty much stayed on the sideline once they saw the market start to roll over. And that's pretty much what the problem is right now is that we're not seeing any kind of momentum right now. That's really what this market environment is right now is that every pump, every rip is pretty much getting shorted right now. And that's pretty much all it is. And it's pretty much followed up by whether it be a headline, whether it be data. Every single pump, every rip is just getting shorted into, and that's basically all it is. So we pretty much woke up this morning, and what we ended up having is we ended up having that inflation data being at basically within line of what the expectation was. It was better than the expectation of that sense, and so the market basically took it bullish, and that's why we ended up seeing that nice little early rip into the early mornings, and then that's basically your sell the news off of that rip this morning. But then yet again on the back end is that inflation is yet at an all-time high. We saw some remarks out of some feds that came out. We saw the bond yield sales that came up as well. That was something that was also a headline that caused a nice little drop at one point of the day. So that's all pretty much factored into the sense that yeah, the inflation data came in line with what was basically expected and beat the street expectations to some extent. It was still roughly pretty much historic right now, and that's basically putting more pressure onto the feds at the end of the day. And so with that pressure coming to the feds now, that's obviously why you saw that the market's not able to pretty much hold up and take that in continuation of good news, right? Because now that's going to continue to put more pressure on the feds despite the inflation data basically being within line of what expectations were. All right. So we do have also data coming out tomorrow. We do have the PPI coming out tomorrow. We'll see if that's going to be another selly event tomorrow, in which maybe we get another gap up off of that data if it's something within line of expectations. And then we're going to want to see again, do we hold those gains that we get tomorrow if we pump off of that data, or do we basically sell off of it yet again like we had today? So that's what I'm going to be primarily watching. Just some things that pretty much crossed my attention today, and what pretty much came to my thought was I did see there was some unusual call flow that pretty much came across for Tesla. What's going on, Randy? I saw some unusual call flow that came across through Tesla. That was actually reported on CNBC by the Nigerian brothers. And so they hit the 1050s for next week. But what that basically told me was that they're likely looking at towards earnings run up. And that's really what crossed my mind. They reported that pretty much around lunchtime or so about that buyer for Tesla with the 1050 calls. So I would pretty much anticipate that those buyers are pretty much in the red right now because of the fact that it's pretty much under that 1K mark. And they bought those 1050 calls, and I'm assuming they likely bought it if it was around lunchtime. I think at that point in the day, we were still roughly over what the 1K mark on Tesla. So that's going to be something I'm going to continue to watch to see if we get that push. I think I pretty much repeatedly said it in terms of the levels I was watching. 1003 was that really big one that I'm watching. I think just below that is the 996. Yeah, so 996. You have the 1003, and then above that, I believe it's right around 1013 or so. Before maybe we could start to see if there's any momentum build there, going into next week for those 1050 calls to likely play for a earnings run up. But those are not to be played with, same week expiration, being for Thursday. They went for next week expiration, so that may not end up being a play until next week, but it's on the watch list. The other one was that they reported on CNBC was also Snow 230 calls. They hit that for this week. I think the highest that Snow actually got up to was about 220 today, if I'm not mistaken. So that's going to be something that's likely going to be on my watch list tomorrow because they actually hit that for today's expiration. So the highest we got today was 222 and they hit 230 calls. So I'm going to see if we can pretty much build any momentum on Snow here tomorrow if we get any kind of pump following that data. And that'll be one that I pretty much watch as well. But bigger picture here, pretty much looking out towards my SPY chart, in which I pretty much gave you guys the level I was watching yesterday. I was pretty much explaining the fact that I wanted to see how we react yet again to that anchored view up that I had from that prior high of January. As you see, we got the beautiful pump once we pretty much broke under that anchored view up. That was it. It was literally just a slow bleed all the way into the end of the day, and that's exactly what you saw. We pretty much went right into the zone that I had right around this 437 mark is what I was looking to see if we would defend, and that's exactly the spot more or less where we pretty much got a bounce and we're resting right upon. So I'm gonna look to see if we defend that 437 yet again. If we can't defend that 437, then we're looking to take out that wick low here that we have from today's price action at 436.65, and then I'll be targeting my next level down is about 432 is what I'm potentially looking at if the market can't hold up tomorrow following that data. So 432 is my ideal target, but I want to see if we can defend that 437. If we defend 437, then we're looking to see if we can reclaim that anchor VWAP, pretty much looking at that 442.74 mark, and then we'll see if we can get some kind of momentum built off of that, and then we could potentially make our way back to the high of the day that we had here at that 445.75. All right. So ideally, I'm leaning bearish. I mean, obviously, because of the fact that the market has not told me otherwise, but to lean bearish right now because of the fact that every data, even though if it's within line of the street, it seems like it's a sudden news event. We have earnings coming up in the end of the week here as well. I believe it kicks off tomorrow with bank earnings as well. That's something to keep an eye on. But every rip being pretty much sold off, I'm inclined to say that even if we get maybe a push towards that anchor view up at that 442.74, I'm inclined to say that we're basically going to end up seeing that get shorted. And we're going to likely test the lows of today yet again. And we'll see if we get a breakdown towards my next lower target here, that 432 mark. All right. So that's pretty much what I'm pretty much anticipating. There's not too much on the watch list per se. I think right off the bat that maybe that's on a lot of your eyes right now is AMD. And that was one that pretty much was a little bit tricky on this morning. I know that I'm pretty much just gonna take away what I had. I know that one was pretty tricky because they were hitting the Nvidia 230 calls pretty much earlier on the day this morning, and that was not able to hold up. I think the highest that it got today was roughly around that 225 mark. But the bigger picture of why I didn't end up taking that Nvidia call through the flow alerts was because I didn't see any kind of momentum off of AMD, and so I was a little bit more hesitant in the fact that I think Nvidia at that point in time was about up already about $5 to $6 at that point, and that's why I didn't particularly look to get into that position because of the fact that I didn't see any of the other semis running behind Nvidia on that gap up that it had, and that's what led me to feel like okay, that was just gonna be not a failure, but it was gonna fall short of getting a beautiful continuation that we all pretty much expected. So it's not to say that tomorrow we may not end up seeing a follow through. Maybe those of you that are probably in the red and you feel compelled that you have to swing it is a possibility that we see some more call buying tomorrow because there was a point in the afternoon here that they were still hitting those 230 calls on Nvidia. So if you're holding those Nvidia calls, don't feel too bad about them. Maybe we get a nice gap up tomorrow. You're able to get out of those positions safely, not at least break even. All right. So that'll be something I'll keep an eye on. But I think the bigger level that I was pretty much watching, and maybe the monthly was what caught my attention. Was it the monthly? Could have been. No, I don't think it was the monthly. It was probably the weekly. So I know those are the level I was watching. I want to see if we're gonna end up holding. Was right around this 94 level. That was basically what I was looking at. Right around the 94, in which that was basically right at the tipping point of where we pretty much smacked our head on repeatedly. And we actually are about $1 shy of that level. That was particularly what I was gonna watch going into tomorrow, and I want to see if we can defend tomorrow. This is gonna be a pretty key level here. I think we already shook out quite the buyers that were in there. Obviously, the space is a lot crowded right now into the semis, but we hit our heads on that 94 level quite a bit. I do want to see if we can pretty much defend it as a support level. That was between November 2020 and leading up towards February of 2021. I'm going to want to see if we can pretty much defend that level, that 94 level. And then we maybe get a nice little reversal there. I think it's already been about 5, 6 days we've had red. We've had 6 red days already on AMD. So it's potentially possible that we find a bottom. Maybe it'd be pre-market, maybe be right at the open, right at that 94 mark. And I think that's the ideal spot in which I would feel comfortable trying to scale into a position on AMD here. Likely be the case that I'll go out towards next week. So 94 calls for next week. Maybe be at the money. I don't know. Depends how the market conditions are tomorrow morning. But I'm gonna look to snatch it up at 94 mark. Hopefully I can get it at the open, not and it doesn't smack it at pre-market. But 94, I'll look to see if I get that. And then we basically get a trip right back up towards that gap failure that's sitting at that 100 mark. So potentially about a $6 move we're looking at with AMD if we can snipe that bottom at 94 and we hold that support level. All right. So that's particularly what I'm going to be looking to see if we can get that. Um, Unexpected big bounce level for AMD first time test. Also weekly 150 in EMA. I mean, it's entirely possible. We'll see. I mean, again, I'm playing it level by level here right now. Pretty much going back towards where we had our peaks. That was basically our peak here that we had back from September 20th. That was one of our highs that we put in. And that was also the last high that we put in from February 21st before we had that nice rounding bottom formation. And we made that pretty much that cup and handle. So 94 again, that's the spot that I'm looking at. I mean, that's basically what I'm looking at. That's what I'm going to look at to get in tomorrow. 94, and then hopefully we get that right, the $6 move up to the upside here, about $100 a mark, and then potentially that will play within sympathy to Nvidia, and then we can see Nvidia make that nice rip over that 225, 226 mark that we had today, and potentially those 230 calls can start to pay out. All right, so it does seem like we're due for a push on the semis here. After having such a sell-off in the semis, it feels like that day is coming in particular for them to get a nice rebound. I think that's one thing I want to highlight. So could that be tomorrow? In fact, it's entirely possible just because of the fact that we already had 6 red days on AMD. I don't even know how many red days we had on Nvidia already. It's the same more or less. Yeah, we had 6 red days also on Nvidia. So it seems like they're due for a rebound type of day. So that's something I'm gonna pay attention to in terms of that. Support level in terms of Nvidia, I think is right around this mark here, around that 209 is where I'm looking at for support on Nvidia. I think that's a ways down, but I think it's gonna end up holding this intermediate support level that we had, in which that body of the candle is holding that 214 half level. So hopefully 214 half holds by morning, and then we have AMD really start to give a follow through on some type of reversal here, and that'll pave the way for Nvidia to make that nice run that we're all expecting to really happen today. That was all right. I'll take a look and see some names that you guys wanted me to take a look at. Let's see. Someone mentioned BAC. Let's take a look at that, Nick. I know that BAC is actually the one that does not have earnings this week. I know that Avery pretty much had his eyes set on BAC and the fact that he wanted to play a sympathy towards the bank earnings. And this was the only bank in particular that actually did not have earnings this week. So I did like that idea on his part. The only thing I'm not fond of is the fact that we have this nice little head and shoulders action. So if I basically just highlight that so you see it, you have that nice little head and shoulders action going on. This is a pretty massive head. And then I'm just going to highlight that right shoulder that you have right there. So that's the only thing I don't particularly like about this bank in particular. I haven't noticed if there's a head and shoulders on any other bank, but that's basically the one thing that caught my attention right now. In terms of demand zone, in which I would expect to see buyers pretty much step in, and I do want to see, is this a double bottom? Ooh, we actually have a double bottom off of the weekly too. That's quite interesting. 38.85 off of the weekly, we have a nice little double bottom action. So that is something that's actually pretty interesting there. 38.85, obviously, it looks like that's going to be your support level, in which you definitely want to look at in terms of your buying today. So that actually, yeah, that smacked that 38.85 today. I wish I would have caught that today. Probably would have sniped that bottom. But that's a beautiful one. If you would have caught that double bottom there, that would have been a beautiful entry on BAC. But again, the only thing I didn't like was that head and shoulders action on there. If we, for whatever reason, end up breaking below that double bottom action, then what I'm potentially looking at is basically our lows here, in which it's right around this area. This is potentially what I'm looking at in terms of this price action, in which we had that chop zone, we had that nice little support, nice rip off of that bounce from back from April 2020. Beautiful rip. We ended up consolidating right around this area yet again in July of 2021, out towards August, and that was your other chop zone before you had another beautiful rip. So I'm inclined to say if this head and shoulders pretty much has any more room to the downside, maybe we get right down to the neckline here basically. We break this little double bottom of that 38.85, and I'm pretty much looking at targeting between 37.5 up towards 38. So, but bigger picture in turn, well, not bigger picture, but shorter term picture, if you're trying to play that short term with the bank earnings right now, 38.85 was your ideal buy-in spot. I would look to see if you can get that buy-in spot yet again tomorrow. Maybe we get some early morning weakness. And then in terms of resistance, if I'm looking at that, is that you're basically looking at this level right around here. You're looking at this pretty much, that's about 40-30 is where your resistance is that you're looking to pretty much take your profit. So if you can somehow maybe get into that lower band here, that double bottom, that 38.85 or somewhere near, then you pretty much take that for about a $2 rip up towards 40-30, and that'll be where I would pretty much say to take your profits. All right. So hopefully that kind of helped you there, Nick. The other one that you mentioned was Walmart. Let me take a peep at Walmart. This is one I'm pretty much waiting on right now. I'm likely going to end up taking a position on it at some point. I just haven't yet. Primarily due to the fact that we had this beautiful wedge breakout, and the weekly is actually pretty much textbook in terms of what I'm looking at. You had your defined resistance points to make that top of the wedge, and you have the beautiful little support trend line that you have on the bottom of this wedge. But what I'm looking at after we had this breakout, you see the past few days, we already had, I think maybe about 2 or 3 red days here now, giving some profits back basically off of this. But I'm going to look for the retest here. And that retest is basically right around that 151 half is where I'm going to be looking to get that retest off of this wedge. And at that 151 half is where I'm going to look to go long. And I'll likely get the 160 calls off of this one. So entry point will be 151 half. You get that beautiful retest off of Walmart here. V, I'm actually looking at Walmart right now, same as Nick. All right. So again, Walmart, you're looking at that wedge. You had the breakout. You're looking for the retest. 151 half is your entry spot on Walmart, and that'll be likely be the spot where I look to get 160 calls, and that's likely going to be out towards basically the end of May. All right. So if I'm hoping I can get that by the end of the week, if we can get that 151 half, and I can get my entry by the end of the week here, and then I will likely end up going out on Walmart here towards that 160 for the end of the month, for end of May. All right. V, I'm hoping you're looking at my screen right now. But okay. So again, 151 is your 151 half is your entry there, and then I'll be looking for the 160 calls for end of May. All right. So that's pretty much the bottom line that I'm looking at with Walmart. The other one you guys mentioned was, let's see, KLAC. Let's take a look at KLAC. I have not looked at this thing. And right off the bat, I pretty much see a nice little head and shoulders here yet again. Um, I'm hoping you pretty much identify that, Kimondia. You have a nice little head and shoulders action going on here. If we're able to pretty much defend this head and shoulders, I'm pretty much basically looking for buyers to step in right in the zone right here. So between 316, 317, call that 317 to 324 is your ideal spot off of the weekly. That's pretty much a very large zone. Obviously, it's a pretty high price stock, so it's a little bit more of a volatile name. So your first, the pretty much your first major support level. I don't know why that word came out so long. 325 is your support level that you want to see us defend here off of this demand zone. 325. If you can't hold 325, then you're looking at picking this up down at that 318 mark. Have I done Google? No, I have not, Christopher. I'm gonna look at Google. I know that we had the alert go off today, so I'll take a peep at it. But KLAC, hopefully this kind of gives you your answer. Ideal support here is you're looking to defend 325, look to defend 318 if 325 doesn't hold. My only concern is you do have a well-defined head and shoulders on this, but if you're able to defend that 325 level, then you pretty much ride this right back up towards 340, 341, and that'll be where you look to take your potential profits there. All right. Um, Paris, yeah, you did miss Spire already. Real quick, I'll just give you a glance of what I was looking at with Spire real quick. I was basically looking to either basically reclaim my anchored view up that we have from the January highs. We basically reclaim that 442.74, or otherwise we get a nice little pump and dump right into that resistance we reject. And I do have our next leg down coming as far down as 432 is what I'm looking at. All right. Other than that, you mentioned looking at Google. All right, let me take a peep at Google. That was a tough one today. That alert came out and I was like, ouch. I knew that we pretty much had our support level pretty much coming down, and I believe it pretty much smacked our support level. And I'm off the daily. Yeah, I'm on the daily. All right. So pretty much watching that, I was watching this zone right here. This is basically the zone that I was particularly looking at in terms of when I was watching what Google was doing. So I definitely want to see us pretty much defend that 2540 level. That was where I was pretty much looking to. I basically said it on live, and I was like 2540 is that level that you basically want to defend. I also gave out a nice little call spread for Google. So if you would have took the call spread that I ended up giving out and it pretty much recovers tomorrow, you would have basically recovered most of all your loss there. If you basically end up taking out of the money calls, then yeah, they'd have likely got you and you took that tumble right into the close, and that was not a pretty one. So, but we did wick right under that 24, 25.40. I'm going to look to see if that next candle tomorrow that opens, can we defend that 25.40 level tomorrow? Otherwise, if we can't defend 25.40, then I do have us coming down as low as this 25.28. Below that level of support, then we're pretty much flirting with this next level of support of 2515, which at that point we'll be looking at that mental number of 2500 as that support level, and that's not going to be pretty. All right, so 2540, below the 2540, you're looking for 2530, and then 2514 and a half is the exact level that you're looking at in terms of that last level of defense, and then the mental number will be that 2500 mark. All right. In terms of upside, and this is where I'm hoping that we get that upside tomorrow. I was ideally looking for that 2583 mark. That's where I was ideally looking at. And then I was pretty much pushing that out towards 2600 for the spread. Ideally, that was to make it cheap and hopefully collect some quick profits. Is why I said that. I think I was looking at the 2600, 2620. So you basically would buy the 2600 strike and you would sell the 2620 strike for this week expiration and in hope to pretty much capitalize on some quick, maybe be 30-40% gains on that once we end up hitting that 2583 mark. So, but that's my upside target was that 2583. So hopefully that ended up helping you, Chris. But I know that was a tough one today. That 2540 was a spot I was hoping it would defend and we would get a bigger bounce in the close, and that wasn't exactly the case. All right. Let me take a peep. What else? Apple. This is just another one. That was on my the one another one that pretty much hit the cloud alert yesterday and pretty much shook everyone out. I think we smacked that cloud alert somewhere right around here, right around that 166 mark yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. And then we start pretty much giving a nice little collapse right into the close, followed by a beautiful little gap up that we had. So I know that was basically a shakeout for a lot of you that maybe got into the Apple alerts, and so pretty much sorry to hear. Maybe those of you that pretty much took a loss on that. No, it is what it is. That's basically what this market has been for most of the part. Is that it's basically shaking out all the bulls, causing more lows, and then basically just giving you a nice solid gap up. And the sad part is that usually most of these gap ups that we've had so far have been outside of market hours, in which a lot of us have not trusted to basically, trying to attempt to swing any positions overnight. So that's pretty much the sad part. But we had a beautiful little gap up. We pretty much created a nice little beautiful falling wedge action that we basically broke out of here into the end of the day. So that was a solid sign. I'm gonna look to see if we build any kind of momentum off of this. I do want to see us pretty much defend this level that we basically were just teetering off of. Right around this 167.5 is that level that I'm watching. So 167.5 needs to hold here tomorrow. We can see it's down about 30-40 cents tomorrow, but I want to see us get that nice reversal off of that 167.5, and then we can start to make our way back up. And the ideal breakout spot to likely test today's highs will be over that 168.64 mark. All right, so we get pretty much defend that 167.5, then we pretty much make our way back up towards 168.64, and we could talk about pretty much making our way back up towards 170. All right, and that'll be basically what I'm pretty much looking at. All right. One quick sec. All right, sorry about that. So that's basically what I'm looking at. 170 close tomorrow. But that'll likely be the fact that it needs to break over that 168 mark, and then we'll look at that one. All right. Last one we'll take a look at is Yeti. I haven't looked at this one in a while. I'm not gonna lie, and I've heard this name tossed around a few times, but I have not looked at it in quite a while. And wow, this has a very defined, well-defined downtrend. Let's see if there's any kind of trendline support. That'll likely be the first thing that I want to see if this catches my attention here. All right, let's see if we can expand this out just a bit. All right, pull our trend line up. Let's see if we can get to the bodies. So we definitely bounced where we needed to be. We pretty much defended the body of this candle, and the body that we pretty much hit from yesterday's candle. So ideally, the fact, and this is usually what I would always say, is that you pretty much always want to look at buying towards trendline support. And so with that trendline support, you basically want to try and buy this one right around that 52 half mark is basically what you want to look at in terms of your buying opportunity here. So you buy at that 52 59 level, and you're basically looking to pretty much crack this trendline support and reclaim it off of the daily. So that's ideally what I will be looking at. As you see, you pretty much cracked it here back from February 24th. And as you see, you basically reclaimed it. That would be the ideal scenario in which I would try to play this. But if you're looking for the ideal spot in which you're trying to play a breakout, not necessarily just a defined downtrend, you're basically looking to pretty much get this over that gap fill here. Over that 58.40, that would ideally give you your setup here towards that gap fill at that 59.35. And then you would want to see that move break over that 61 half to get a full on break of this broader defined downtrend. All right. So that's pretty much what I would say with that. I just don't like the setup at all. It's not one that I would dip my toes in right here, right now, because of the fact that you have a well-defined downtrend. And the best case scenario I can tell you is buying off of support, which is right around that 52, 59 mark. All right. So pretty much, hopefully that ended up helping. Do I have the Qs charted? No, I have not looked at the Qs too much. I think I just been playing. For the most part, Eugene, I pretty much just been playing individual names that have relative strength. Just because of the fact that I know that the Qs pretty much look ugly in perspective, and pretty much looking at rotation in terms of the energy sector. And that's really what I've been feeding off of. I know that if you probably heard Tatum on Voice today, he was looking at the energy sector and it was actually looking pretty solid. So that's basically what I'm looking at every morning, taking it day by day. There's not necessarily a point to look at the cues right now in the sense that ideally it's going to look pretty much ideally like SPY is looking at right now, in which there's just no defined formation that's going on right now that you can say right now. That's really the problem. And the sense that the queues are pretty much getting a nice pump like we did today, and it's just continually getting sold off. There's nothing that's pretty much standing out to me in terms of the queues right now that I want to say that it's going to be convincing for me to really want to go along here right now. All right. But other than that, maybe Apple reverses on an earnings run near the end of the month. It's entirely possible. I don't know if there was one name that pretty much carries this entire market, it's Apple. I mean, Apple is pretty much the backbone of this entire market. Their earnings will likely be one of the most key earnings this pretty much this quarter, and that's going to be something that we're definitely going to want to pretty much pay attention to in terms of that. So I'm gonna be looking at Apple earnings. I just do not, be honest with you, I'm bearish on Apple. I don't expect the fact that they're gonna pretty much get any kind of movement beyond going above 175 yet again. I think they're gonna continue to pretty much regress with the broader market and what we're seeing. So it'll likely be some chop more or so or less if I want to say the best case scenario, but their earnings will likely be the turning point in which you will get that defined answer that you're looking at for a reversal. All right. But other than that, that kind of wraps up our session here today, guys. Again, it's a short week. Tomorrow's like basically our Thursday, and then we have one more day of trading. So keep it light. That's probably the best thing I can say right now. Keep your position size light and try to be careful with the weeklies, given the fact that it is a short week. Your premiums are going to be pretty much eaten alive out of the money. So be careful with that. But other than that, I'll see you guys on live tomorrow. We'll see if this is going to be another pump and dump yet again tomorrow. But we'll see what the data brings us first. All right. Other than that, appreciate you guys joining. Drop a like for me. But other than that, see you guys on live tomorrow morning. Later, guys.